Assalamualaikum to Dr. Muhammad Fajil Abdul Batau and my fellow friends. My name is Nur Muhammad Shafi bin Abdul Aziz. We are from Group 2 and we will present about the international trade. I will start with the introduction first. What is international trade? So, as referred to Investopedia, international trade is the exchange of goods and services among states. International trade allows countries to expand their markets, access goods and services that otherwise may not have been available domestically. The importance of international trade was recognized early on by political economists such as Adam Smith and David Ricardo. International trade ultimately results in more competitive pricing and brings a cheaper product to the consumer. The importance of international trade for the states involved. First, make use of abundant raw materials. Some countries are naturally abundant in raw materials such as oil in Qatar, metals, fish in Iceland. Without trade, these countries will not benefit from the natural endowments of raw materials. Other states will import those goods where resources are scarce. Second, comparative advantage. Comparative advantage means states should specialize in those goods where they have a relatively lower opportunity cost. For example, India with lower labor costs may have a comparative advantage in labor-intensive production. Therefore, it will be efficient for India to export these services and goods. It means that trade allows the states to specialize in goods and services in international trade. Third, global growth and economic development. International trade has been an important factor in promoting economic growth. This growth has led to a reduction in absolute poverty levels, especially in Southeast Asia, which has seen high rates of growth of GDP since the 1980s. Fourth, encouraging the opportunity for foreign direct investment (FDI) in the states. International trade allows states to participate in a global economy, encouraging the opportunity for foreign direct investment (FDI). In theory, economies can thus grow more efficiently. For the receiving government, FDI is a means by which foreign currency and expertise can enter the state. It raises employment levels and theoretically leads to a growth in the gross domestic product (GDP). For example, in Malaysia, services and manufacturing sectors were the main contributors for FDI flows in 2020, and main countries for FDI flows in Malaysia were Singapore, Thailand, and China. The example of International Trade Organization, which is World Trade Organization (WTO). WTO was created in 1995 as an international institution that oversees the global trade rules among states. It superseded the 1947 General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade (GATT) created in the wake of World War II. The main function of the organization is to help producers of goods and services, as well as exporters and importers, protect and manage their businesses. As of 2021, WTO has 164 member states and 24 observer states and governments. The WTO is essentially an alternative dispute or mediation entity that upholds the international rules of trade among states.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is NURIN AFRINA binti SHAMSUL, and I would like to continue on the discussions of the issues of international trade. First thing first is about the political interference in market. The political interference in market means that the intervention of the political beliefs of one another in the international trade. Actually, when doing a business between each other, there should not be any influence of personal or political preference between the buyers and sellers, but only concerned with the price and the quality of the product itself. The example of the government intervention in international trade is by imposing tariff and ban on the certain products. Political interference, in other words, means that the government intervention. This happened when government imposing tariff which could make the price of the goods higher and disrupting the balance of international trade. When the economic transaction or international trade having a problem like this, it is called the market imperfections. So why do market imperfections arise? It happened when in international market does not have a perfect competition. For example, the common business structure is like monopoly and oligopoly. The first market structure is monopoly. Monopoly means that only one firm as a producer can restrict output raise price and enjoy supernormal profit in the long run. For example, Microsoft Corporation on computer operating system which use Windows software. The second is oligopoly. Oligopoly is a small number in firm who can restrict output and fix price in major industries like oil and gas and airlines. This industry is known as a hard entry industry as it is hard to entry and need a lot of capital investment to make purchase of the airplane. For example, in US, the major domestic airlines is American Airlines and United Airlines Holdings. Other example is for oil companies like Petronas in Malaysia and Gazprom in Russia. The second government intervention in the international trade is ban and restricted goods on certain products. For example, like controlled drugs, offensive weapons like flick knives, self-defense spray like pepper spray, endangered species of animal and plants, and rough diamonds. Next, we move to the reason why political interference happen. It is because of 4 reasons, namely political, economic, social, and cultural. The first one is political reason. It is to protect jobs or specific industries for national security purposes like weapon, defense, telecommunication, because they don't want advanced technologies information to be sold to unfriendly foreign states. As for economic purposes, it is to protect infant industries by imposing tariff so that the government can encourage people to support local and new businesses. Other than that, it is for employment rates to maintain high level of employment and provide jobs opportunities to the people. Lastly, for cultural and social, it is to limit the influence of American culture on local market by limiting or denying the entry of American companies operating in the media, food, and music industries.
Economic sanctions are defined as the withdrawal of the customary trade and financial relation for foreign and security policy purposes. Sanction takes a variety of forms which include travel bans, asset freezes, arms embargoes, capital restraint, foreign aid reduction, and trade restriction. And national governments and international bodies such as United Nations and European Union have imposed economic sanctions to coerce, deter, punish, and shame the entities that endanger to their interests or to violate the international norms of behavior. Sanctions are generally viewed as lower cost and lower risk course of action between diplomacy and war. Policymakers may consider sanctions as the response to the foreign crisis in which the national interest is less than vital or the military action is not feasible. For example, over the years, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has engaged in a wide range of activities that has drew the international criticism in the form of sanctions, including the development of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. Several rounds of bilateral and multilateral negotiations on the denuclearization have failed since 1990s. Therefore, the 15 members of UN have imposed a UN sanction which bans the trade of arms and military equipment, freezes the asset of the individual that involved in the country's nuclear programs, and ban the import of certain luxury of goods. Also, the United States has imposed unilateral sanctions on North Korea which restrict more on the economic activities and target a larger list of individuals and businesses than the UN sanction. They are primarily intended to disrupt the Pyongyang missiles and nuclear technology development.
My name is Athirah AZLI. So I will explain about the issue on tariff. So what is tariff? Tariff is a tax created by the government to protect domestic businesses. It is one of political interference. Tariff is imposed on goods that imported from abroad. This tariff is not only to protect domestic businesses, but it's also a result of national income. Tariff is a tool of protectionism. It is created to protect. So there are two types of tariff, which is, for the first one is a specific tariff, and the second one is ad valorem tariff. So next is who is practice the tariff. So usually all countries that involve international trade will impose tariff on imported goods. So example of good that can be a tariff such as car, steel, food, beauty products, and others. So World Trade Organization have set the percent of tariff that a country can charge. So next, I will explain about the importance of tariff for one state. So first, it is to protect domestic businesses. Usually, people tend to buy an import product because they have a quality rather than buy a local product. So for an example, in a beauty product, people tend to buy a beauty product from overseas, such as Korean, Western, and others. So with tariff will make the import product will be pricey and people will change their taste to a local product instead. So for the second importance of tariff is it will give a revenue to state. When an import product want to enter a Malaysian market, they will be and have subject to tariff. So with this situation, it will give an advantage to the government, which is they can gain more profit. So next, it will have a domestic businesses to gain more profit. When people cannot afford an imported product, they have to buy local product instead. With this, it will help domestic businesses to gain more profit. So next, I will explain about the issue on tariff issue, which is it linked into issue of a vegetables rising price in Malaysia right now. Basically, not just of vegetables, but there are many more products that arise in price. So this is not a new issue for Malaysia, but recently this issue has been hotly debated by a lot of people. As we know that Malaysia has long received food imported from abroad. The main reason why we have to import food stuff from abroad is because we lack of resources to accommodate the growing population in Malaysia. Malaysia still have the resources, but our resources that we produce is not enough to cover all the population in Malaysia. So according to MSTAR, among the countries that import vegetables and fruits from Malaysia are such as China, India, Thailand, Australia, and even Singapore. Every year, the government spends a lot of money on imported vegetables and fruits from abroad. The main reason why vegetables become so expensive right now is because a supplier put a high prices, and when the price charged by the supplier is expensive, then the tariff that will be charged will also increase, and it is impact on the consumer or the buyer itself. So consumers are going to get this effect because they are the one who paying the goods. So to prevent this happen, there are many alternative ways that have been taken by the government to prevent this from happening. So for example, among of that is making a vegetable crops on a large scales. When Malaysia can produce its own vegetables and enough, then the people do not have to pay high prices for vegetables and also fruits. This tariff issue is not a problem if it happens to non-essential goods, but it is an issue on a necessity such as food, vegetables, and so on. If the price charged by the importing country is expensive, and the tariff that will be charged become expensive too. So it is because tariff that being charged on that product is based on the price of product, and the consumer has to pay an expensive price. So this is how tariff issue arise that can give an impact toward people.
Hi, my name is ROSLAN. So let's hear about what is COVID-19 first before we move on to the issue of it. Coronavirus disease 2019 is defined as illness caused by a novel coronavirus which was first identified amid an outbreak of respiratory illness cases in Wuhan City, Hubei Province, China. It was initially reported to the World Health Organization on 31st December 2019. On 11 March 2020, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 is a global pandemic. It first such designation since declaring H1N1 influenza a pandemic in 2009. Cooperation and transparency are playing a key role in tackling the COVID-19 pandemic and in fostering economic recovery, and trade policy has a central role to play in both of these efforts. These elements are common theme statements and proposals that were put forward over the past year by different groups of World Trade Organization members. Data are critical to inform decision-making, and trade policy is not an exception. An in-depth understanding of the supply chain problems caused by the COVID-19 pandemic needs to be grounded in data. A lack of timely information makes it difficult to take informed decisions and could lead to suboptimal or counterproductive policy measures. Given the nature of international trade, no single World Trade Organization member has complete information about world trade within its jurisdiction. Therefore, it is necessary to depend on sharing information with other members. Data sharing is a public good. In a challenging and uncertain situation, trade is essential to save lives. On top of that, it is important to keep trade flowing, both to ensure the supply of essential products and to send a signal of confidence for the global economy. However, keeping trade flowing requires cooperation and trust. For instance, that the market will supply essentials, that country will not impose export restrictions, and that imports do not pose health risks. This is a particular challenge at a time of trade tensions where the international trading system was already subject to an increased number of new restrictions and distortions, from tariff increases among major traders to significant government support in key sectors. Efforts at dialogue to manage and prevent tensions through ongoing negotiations are now complicated by mobility restrictions. But in the context of the severe economic strain from COVID-19, it is more important than ever to avoid escalation of the current trade tensions. Despite considerable uncertainty, there are few actions that can be taken now. First, keep global supply chains going, especially for essentials. An immediate issue is facilitating medical supplies necessary to tackle COVID-19, many of which are produced across a number of countries and for which trade is the means of ensuring global supply. For example, at the onset of the crisis, China was the main manufacturer of surgical masks, accounting for about one-half of world capacity. Yet, in January, this was not enough to meet the demand. China stopped exporting masks and imported 56 million masks in the first week of January. Masks were also donated to China by some countries. Secondly, avoid export restrictions on essential goods such as medical equipment and especially for food products. The lesson of the food price crisis of 2007 and 2008 is that export restrictions are a recipe for self-inflicted harm, undermining food security for everyone. Moreover, high levels of government support are having important effects on production levels and global competition. This work has highlighted new trends towards non-transparent and significant government support provided through the financial system in the form of below-market loans and government equity.
In conclusion, International trade is important to all states in order to improve their economies and be involved internationally to achieve the objectives and goals of the states. Economic theory indicates that international trade raises the standard of living of the states. However, there are several issues that can affect international trade. Either the issues are long-term or short-term effects, as mentioned before, that need to be solved for the good of all the states. Thank you.